Hi, thanks for checking our channel here. This is going to be a little show and tell video on this particular unit. This is an old unit called a Gallagher M80. They started making this model, at least selling here in the States, probably back in the early 90s. And then they continued on to probably 2004 or 5, somewhere in that range, when they came out with the I don't know, M150 or whatever it was back then. But these are good little units. Not super powerful, but very reliable. They're kind of an overly built unit on the inside, old school electronics. This unit, serial number is that, but it's just it's a pre-1999 serial number, because back in the day, before they had like their date code format they use now, before 1999, they used to use some kind of sequential number, and I think the only date thing they had going on with it was on the inside of the little sticker. On the transformer, it had like some stats and specs on it, and that would slowly fade and deteriorate over time. So that would have had the date of whoever inspected it when it was done being built. They have a month and a year on it most times, but that I can't even read that on the transformer. It's so faded, I can't read anything on there. But this is a pre-1999 unit. Anyways, later ones looked just similar, or very similar to it, as a black case and a little bit different sticker look to it. This one used to be orange up here and stuff like that. It's all faded because it's been used for so long. The customer originally, when we talked to them, they thought it had low output, very little voltage was coming out of it. He said, "I think the transformer's bad." I was like, I don't think so, not on that model, because the transformers in these old Gallaghers from this generation were very, very reliable, almost bulletproof. I rarely have I ever had to change one of the transformers in this generation of unit. They used a variation of the transformers in this one. They had like about 5 or 6 different transformers for different models. And this was shared with about 3 or 4 of the units. This was the smallest of those 3 or 4. Went all the way up to the M400 back then. But out of all those, and then later ones had like the M600s, M1000s, those had a very similar transformer style, just a different winding setup. But they were the same shape and everything, just different guts on the transformer itself. And those are pretty reliable too. We don't see the transformers go bad in those either, unless they get hit by lightning and split them in half. So he's like, he asked if we think we could fix it. I said, yeah, probably. I said, give it a shot. Gallagher themselves don't work on these old ones anymore. They just board swap. If they can't just swap another board in there, on these older ones, they just, they don't bother fixing it. So I said, well, we'll take a chance on it, because I hate to throw the thing away. It's a good little unit, very reliable. So if we can get the thing going, you might get another 10, 20 years out of it, that sort of thing. So we got it in. I had 2 things wrong with it. The transformer was perfectly fine. Nothing was wrong with it like I thought. Had a bad capacitor, very weak capacitor, and there's a small diode on the board that protects the light bulb and some other stuff. Well, the light bulb, it was working once we got that capacitor soldered in there and put it in place. Started working. Red light was barely flashing, but the voltage on the output was like 7,000 volts, which is what this one puts out. Peak voltage was right around 7 kV. And so I started tracing the board, looking for an issue with components that feed into that light bulb. So I knew the output was fine, but why wasn't the bulb flashing all the way? So first thing I checked was that diode. It was the easiest thing I could check, and it was shorted. So all the power was coming to that and dropping off at the diode before it got to the bulbs and stuff. So we changed that diode out to the next size bigger, and boom, now the light's nice and bright. You see it plain as day. So I'm kind of glad we got a hold of this versus Gallagher, because Gallagher just told you to throw it away and buy a new one, and we just saved the guy a bunch of money by not have to throw this thing away, because the rest of the board is fine. Nothing else wrong with it. It works perfectly fine. It's the original board. It's got that old style version board. They made later ones that looked a lot different than this one, and this has just got the earlier version in it. So it's 25-30-year-old board, but got the thing going again. So we're gonna, and it's actually a little stronger than what it was before. This is a 0.8 stored joule. It's probably like 0.6 output probably back in its day. We put a little bit bigger capacitor in there to give a little more punch to the thing. So we'll get it turned on. We're going to do peak voltage, no load, and we'll show you what the kilovolts are. Clicking and flashing along there. Watch this number right there. It's our peak voltage. And right around 7 kV, right where it's supposed to be. Now we'll put a 500 ohm load on it, which is pretty standard. And we'll see what kind of voltage it drops down to 4.2 at 1.4 joule output. So it's almost double the power out of it compared to what it was from the factory way back when. We'll drop it down to 200 ohms. This is pretty hard load for such a small joule unit, so I don't know where it's gonna level out at. We're at 2.5 kV at 1 joule. Let's drop our voltage range down a little bit, see if we can get a finer. Nope. Drop it down one more time. It didn't change too much. 2.5 kV. So 500. So somewhere between 500 and 200 ohm load on there. That's where our sweet spot's going to be for our peak load, our peak joules. But we're at 1.4, so maybe we get to 1.6 if we get like a 300 ohm load in there. But I don't have a 300 ohm load. So let's see what kind of what our pulse width and everything is. Let's go no load again. Now what this is going to show is that we're going to go, see, we're on seconds and milliseconds, so we're going to look at that and that. So instead of joules and voltage, it's going to be how fast or how often is it pulsing, like how often does it click per second, or however I want to call that. And then how often is that shock actually on the line, like how long is that actual shock itself. So go across it again. It pulses every 1.1 second. See that? 1.1 seconds, how often it clicks. And the shock itself on the line is only on for 0.08 milliseconds. So, very, very quick pulse. Most brands kind of, on their pulse times, are usually between 1 and 1.5 seconds on average. There's not very many that go more than a second. They do that for safety reasons. Why? Because if it was too fast of a pulse, maybe the animal or person or whoever's touching it won't be able to get off the fence in time before the second pulse comes back around. Because it was like a half-second pulse, and your body's natural reaction is to let go of that fence line, because it's just going to slap you right off there. But before you can pull your hand off, the next pulse comes back to you, it might grab you again, and where you can't get off the line. You can see the light flashing there. So, but it's a good little unit. So we just cost Gallagher another lost sale, which that's fine. I sell enough of these things, but save another one from going to the landfill. It's like this thing. Put it back on the wall, let it go back to working again. Because why throw it away when the thing's 80-90% of the unit was still perfectly good on the inside? So why throw away the whole unit just for two bad little parts on it? Back capacitor, the main discharge capacitor was just wore out from age, and that little diode was bad. So pretty cheap fix for the customer. I haven't called him yet to give him a quote, but I'm sure they'll fix it. I mean, not that much money to do it. And a newer model, lasts as long as this one. You can't even fix the new ones on the small Gallaghers anyways. They're throwaway item. But these old ones back then, you could fix them with new boards when they still offered them. Or you could do what we just did to the thing and fix the unit on the inside. So if you guys want to see the inside of it, we'll pull it apart real quick, turn it off. So there's the inside. Got these little orange things, are the varistors or MOVs, VDRs, what do you call them? VDRs, I think was the technical name. But what we changed in it was the main discharge capacitor in there was bad. We put a size and a half bigger than the factory one. That little diode right there was bad. This black one right here was a little bit smaller one that was sitting there. I think a 1.5 amp. I forget the voltage range, but 1.5 amp. I think we put a 2 or 3 amp diode in there because that's what I had in stock. Well, I had bigger ones, but it's like I don't want too large, so it's just to do it. But yeah, it works fine now. Got the old school capacitors on there; they're perfectly fine as well. Everything else works good. So it did have a little bit of bugs in there, but I think it's just I think they were dead ants. But I blew those off there. They weren't causing me any harm. It was dead. But yeah, there's that label in there. You can hardly read it. Let's see. They've got some of the specs 1.15 seconds. They do have the pulse interval. Pulse interval is 1.15 seconds. Can't hardly read it. And the pulse width was 0.25 or 0.25. I can't read it. Oh, whatever. And then the peak volts was 7.2, and we were reading 6.9, so right in the same ballpark. And then stored joules was 0.8 stored joule, which is this is a 0.88 stored joules, and that's what we were reading was output joules because we were testing at the output terminals. We weren't testing the capacitor inside there, so. Got the unit going again, so I'm sure the customer will be pretty happy. So if you got a fence charger, an old one, be happy to take a look at it for you. We fixed a lot of fence chargers for people. And if something else comes up, see you later on.